Alright, this is the last video for the nervous system. And so what I'm going to go through now are the regions of the brain and what they do. So where do you pick up hearing? Where do you pick up sight? Where do you pick up speech? That kind of thing. What areas in the brain that they're found. Okay, first part that I'm going to talk about is the cerebral cortex. And if you remember, the cortex is the outermost part of the brain. I'm not talking about deep tissue of the brain. I'm talking about the surface of the brain. That's where the cortex is going to be found. About 1/8 of an inch thick, which is not very thick, but it makes up 40% of the brain matter. And that is going to control your conscious behavior. Within the cortex, there are different functional areas. And the first area that we're going to talk about, or the areas we're going to talk about, are motor areas. And those motor areas are responsible for movement. And motor means movement. Motor in your car helps you move. That's kind of how I remember it. Okay, the primary motor cortex located in the precentral gyrus is going to control your voluntary muscle movement. So movement that you control. Okay. The area that you associate with speech is going to be called Broca's area. B-R-O-C-A. Broca's area is very important. A lot of times in surgery, for brain surgery, the surgeons will keep you awake, and they'll ask you, they'll kind of put you in twilight. You can't feel anything, but they'll keep you awake, and they will say, can you name this? Can you speak? Can you say anything? If they're trying to work in an area that is around Broca's area, because they don't want to interfere with your speech, and so they want to make sure that they don't take out that portion of the brain, or they don't affect that area if they can keep from it. Okay, controlling your voluntary eye movement. So you look to the right or the left and you tell yourself, look at the ceiling, and it makes your eyes go up. That's voluntary eye movement. That is called the frontal eye field. I'm not going into a whole lot of detail here, but you will have to memorize. If I ask you a question, what area of the brain is responsible for speech? You'd pick Broca's area. What area controls voluntary muscle movement? That would be primary motor cortex. What about voluntary eye movement? Well, the eye field. So just strictly memorization here. Those were your motor areas. These are going to be your sensory areas. So where do I pick up hearing, or where do I pick up sound? That kind of thing. All right. Sensory information from your skin and your muscles found in your postcentral gyrus is called the primary somatosensory, S-O-M-A-T-O-S-E-N-S-O-R-Y. Soma means body. Somato also can mean body. Sensory cortex. It's in the cortex of the brain. And this is going to pick up your sensory information from your skin and your muscles. So somebody is scratching your back, or somebody's massaging your shoulders. That would be picked up in the primary somatosensory cortex. In the occipital lobe of the brain, you will pick up information from your eyes. What do you see? And that is going to be called your primary visual cortex. Duh. Okay, visual, eyes. I might also ask what lobe of the brain is responsible for sight. So I would be cautious and would look at those lobes as well whenever you're studying. Okay, the next one is going to pick up sound. And your sound is going to be in the auditory area of the brain. Simple enough. Some of this stuff's common sense. And that is in the top part of the temporal lobe. In the middle of the temporal lobe, you will actually pick up the sense of smell. And the sense of smell is going to be called the olfactory area. Olfactory stink. That's how we remember that. So the medial aspect of the temporal lobe would be smell, whereas the upper part, the more superior part towards your head, towards the top of your head, would be the hearing and sound. In your parietal lobe, you will get the sense of taste, is where you pick up taste, and that's called the gustatory cortex or area. This is silly, but how I remember this is the verb gustar in Spanish means to like, and I like to eat. And so that's how I remember taste, found in the parietal lobe. Okay, association areas are where it's not necessarily just for the sense of smell or just for the sense of taste. It's more complex. It's like, how do we learn? Where's our personality come from? How do we understand when we look at this paper we can read association area? How does all that work in the brain? In the frontal lobe, you will get your intellect, you will get complex learning, and you will get some personality. And that is called the prefrontal cortex. And that actually is not completely developed until around 22, 23, somewhere around there, early 20s. And so that area is still developing, and that's why they say teenagers and early people in their early 20s will make kind of impulsive decisions because that prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet. Not an excuse, but it does relate back to, like in my education classes, to how do we actually teach things to adolescents because that prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet. Okay, number 2 is going to be found on one side only in all of these lobes, temporal, parietal, and occipital lobe. And that's going to be called your general interpretation area. And how that works is it takes in a lot of information and will kind of consolidate it into one single thought. So you're picking up a lot of different sensory information. You're picking up hearing, you're picking up sound, you're picking up smell, you're picking up sight, you're picking all those things up together, and you are linking that to one thing. So you walk into a restaurant and it smells like cookies, and it smells like cupcakes, and it smells like sweet, but you can see the stuff as well. You can walk in and say, oh, I think I'm in a bakery. And so you are consolidating all of that sensory information and then putting it into one thought. Okay, posterior temporal lobe is how we understand written and spoken language. Not how do we speak, that would be Broca's area, but how do I understand that these words are written on this paper and you're hearing me read them out loud. That is called Wernicke's area. Wernicke. Okay, so all of those are just memorization. Make yourself some flashcards. Wernicke's area, written and spoken language. Olfactory area, smell. Gustatory cortex, taste. That's as simple as I can make it. Okay, number 2, if you remember the areas of gray matter, which are deep within